So what is it that makes startups so fast? How do they get products to market so quickly? Ultimately, it comes down to runway. Startups don't have the runway to deliberate for weeks. You don't have time to sit there and wonder if this is the best approach and, bring everybody on board about whether the button color here should be blue or green. You need to be really, really decisive, and you need to be efficient. So startups have a lot of constraints, and constraints can be this great thing because it forces you to be scrappy and creative. You also don't need to get anything through legal, compliance, risk, and marketing, because generally you're one or two co-founders and you are all of those teams. So you can make decisions really, really quickly. So you've got to just keep this forward momentum, because if not, you're going to run out of money. As opposed to that, in corporate, decisions can sometimes move at a glacial pace. So you get this idea that then kind of trickles up through management. You've got your decision makers, they get analysts involved, you've got research, legal, marketing. You eventually get to this cautious implementation that's kind of a bit of a shadow of the original idea. Because big companies can afford to make slow decisions. You can take the time to get the full picture before you're acting. Very unlike a startup, because a startup, the stakes are so high and you often have to act when you've only got 30% of the picture. So when you're in a startup, it's really hard to understand why companies are so big, why big companies are so slow to move. But the reality is lots of us are in really highly regulated industries. So I know from seeing you guys on Slack, there's lots of people here in healthcare, there's lots of people in finance, lots of people in government, and you can't move that quickly when you've got these regulated industries. You've got to be very cautious. There's also the issue of legacy software. So my company is 7 years old, and we've already got a lot of legacy software that we're dealing with. I know Alana from Westpac is going to be talking later. Like, she works for a 200-year-old bank. So all of a sudden, you've got this software that it just takes such a long time to do anything with. It's not, all microservices and build from the ground up like you do with a startup. And as teams grow, we just need a lot more process. So I'm working on a project at the moment, and we have kind of used a lot of the startup methodology to move things really quickly. And I was in a meeting about it last Thursday, and we came to this decision really quickly. Like, we used a lot of the startup ways of doing things. And then the product manager is like, okay, great. Well, we've made this decision. I'll take that to steering committee in 2 weeks, and then we'll kind of come back with next steps. And that just seems to be the way things work. It takes a long time to get the right people in a room to kind of run these decisions by them. And so that's another reason why things are so slow. It's also about focus. So most startups have one product, one project, one problem that they're trying to solve. At the moment, I'm on 4 major projects, and I'm kind of one person in a product team of 120. And each person I'm dealing with also has multiple projects going on. So everybody's attention is really split. There's lots of different priorities. There's lots of kind of transaction cost in trying to move quickly and make decisions quickly, and all of the handoff and the different communication that needs to happen to make sure everybody's on the same page. And this is why large companies can only move at a fraction of the pace of a startup, because our focus is split in a bunch of different directions. So I want to talk a little bit about organizational psychology before I get to some of the solutions, because I'm a product person and that's what we do, right? We want to understand the why things work the way we work before we start to unpack some of the solutions. So a lot of it can be traced back to this guy. So this is Robin Dunbar. He's an anthropologist, he's English. And he did a lot of work on early societies, like early tribes and agricultural communities and primates. And his theory is that humans have about 150 connections that we can make before communications and relationships start to break down. So he was really kind of looking at it with an anthropological lens, but the same principles apply in business. So groups of less than 100 people, startups, can operate really cohesively using this informal reciprocal ways to regulate behavior. We all understand where we sit with each other and who owes who a favor and what that person's agenda is. So in a startup, the lack of structure and the informality means you get work done really quickly, which means you can move really quickly. But as groups get bigger, so over about 150 people, the human brain doesn't have the capacity it needs to stay on top of, who owes who a favor and what's that person's agenda and who do I go to for this. So there is this new level of social complexity that means you're not collaborating as effectively as you once did. So to continue to function past 150, you need to get some established rules or some outside authorities. So for those of you who are in corporate, see if some of these sound familiar to you, because over 150, you get teams start fighting with each other and it starts to become kind of more visible and intense. I was just dealing with this one this morning. Duplicate work happens with surprising regularity. So lots of people are trying to solve the same problems. And that's a great thing. It's very positive. But the results are there's lots of time wasted or even more infighting between teams as everybody's kind of trying to approach these systematic issues. And literally that happened this morning. It was, I was like, wait a minute, I'm working on this. You're working on this too. And we were kind of at the same place. And so that just happens with these communication breakdowns at bigger size. You get a lot of people in the business who just spend time cleaning up other people's messes. So sometimes entire teams are created to solve problems that were created earlier on in the workflow. And this one kind of kills me as a product person. So it means people in the business spend more time fighting internal problems than they do adding value to your users. And just think about that as a moment, because I know people here are designers and they're engineers and they're product people. And I know everybody is really driven into creating value for our users. That's what gets us up every morning as product people. And none of us want to be spending our time fighting these internal battles rather than shipping value. So, very typically kind of the business starts to get top heavy. We add more layers of management and more levels of leadership, and we get more rules about how work should flow. So there are ways of solving it. How do you kind of work around this Dunbar number of 150? So there's some structural things that companies have tried. So Amazon have this idea of 2 pizza teams, where every internal team is small enough that you can feed them with 2 pizzas. So that's, 8 or 9 people. And that just means you've got smaller teams, you're not managing timetables and communication, and you get more time to actually, create great products and ship them because you're not spending all of your time kind of communicating with each other.